When did you realize your parents were bad at parenting?
When I just about to turn 5 years old and it was close to Christmas. My parents and I lived in a small upstairs apartment in San Diego. My dad was in the Navy and he had just told my mother the Navy was going to be his career. They had a fight so bad the older couple from downstairs came up and asked them to keep it down. I was hiding behind the couch. The lady took me by the hand and led me down the stairs while my parents cooled down. She gave me cookies and milk. I hadn't said a word. Finally, I asked to use her phone. She said sure. I called my grandmother collect, back then landlines had telephone operators, and told her to send my grandfather for me. My grandparents lived in Los Angeles. I told my grandmother little children shouldn't have to be afraid of their mommy and daddy. They would say to me, I could just kill you. Now I was afraid we all were going to die, so come and get me. I spent a fearful night. My parents cooled off and my dad went to work that next morning as usual. Early in the morning, not long after he left, my grandfather, Dad's dad, showed up. He was very cold to my mother. He told her to pack my bag. She balked. He told her she and my dad could do this the easy way or the hard way, but never again was I ever going to have to be frightened to live with them. He was taking me to his house and the two of them could come up for the weekend and talk over the situation. My grandfather was a very powerful man. My mother quickly packed my bag and kissed me goodbye. She very infrequently kissed me. As I was going down the stairs, the neighbor lady opened her door a crack and waved at me. I waved back. When I was 16, with help of my grandfather, I became legally emancipated from my parents. That is a whole different story. I think I was probably 14 when it finally clicked that something was really off about my family. My earliest memory is the police being called to our trailer because my parents only had one vehicle and my dad was kicking my mom out, but wouldn't let her take the car. This was a recurrent situation where my mom would be kicked out, take me with her, and then have me call my dad and beg to come home. Mind you, at this time, I had two brothers, a younger and an older, but only I was the one who had to leave. I found out when I was 10 that my dad is not actually my biological father, so that explained a lot. But anyways, so. I was 4, and I have spotty memories of being shacked up with random strangers that my mom knew for who knows how many nights and my mom putting me on the phone to make daddy let us come home. It only progressed as we got older. My parents are not alcoholics or drug addicts, they were both middle-class working adults during my childhood. We lived in a normal house, normal neighborhood, with no genuine excuse for their behavior as far as we knew. My parents would argue for weeks at a time. The same argument, from the time they woke up at 4 a.m. until the time they went to sleep at 12 a.m. Then repeat the next day. Arguing was the easy part. They would throw things, break phones, remotes, TVs, and computers. Throw chairs through walls, seriously, the wall didn't deserve that. They would break whatever was around. That was the beginning. They never argued in private, hell no. They made sure it was out in the open. Even to this day, at 22 years old, loud noises put me on edge. Screaming immediately causes me to freak out and flinch. Straight PTSD shit, I guess. Eventually it progressed into more violence. Hitting each other, breaking bones, throwing each other on the floor. Sometimes we would listen to our mom scream bloody murder while my dad choked her and slammed her against the bedroom door. Sometimes we would listen to my dad scream when my mom would throw stuff at him. Most of the time it was my mom screaming because she couldn't get up or couldn't breathe. But for us, this was normal. I didn't have many friends, if at all. I talked to some people in school, but the rule my parents told us was that we never talk about our house. If we say bad things, DCF will take us away and put us in foster care. They would always tell us that, you don't even know what abuse is. So, for us, this was normal. All kids' parents fight like this. Everyone watches their mom get choked. Everyone hides in the closet when they're afraid their parents are going to kill each other. It's normal. My parents are especially weird about control. We were not allowed to have vegetables. Yes, you read that right. We absolutely could not have vegetables unless we went to my grandmother's. Why? Because my dad hated them. We were only allowed to eat what he liked to eat. He is a picky eater, so the menu consisted of pizza, French fries, soda, chicken, or burgers. Nothing else. Everything we ate we had to ask permission for, and even as an adult I'm really not sure if this is something people do or not. We couldn't drink milk in the house, because it was Dad's. We couldn't eat cereal because it's Dad's. We couldn't drink soda, or water bottles, or juice because it belonged to Dad. When we were told to eat, we had to eat. We didn't have a dinner table once I was like 11 years old. Our eating arrangement was to eat a huge plate of way too much junk food in front of the TV. It eventually got to the point that I stopped eating at home, only at school, because I promise you eating pizza and French fries 7 days a week is repulsive. If people came over to our house, like friends, my brothers and I would freak out if they grabbed a soda without asking. We would have to call my mother and ask if we were allowed to have a drink or eat something. Friends would look at us like we were crazy, but that's just our normal. None of us were ever allowed to cook either. Even now, every time I cook, my mother criticizes it. She makes fun of how I stir things, or that I'm always doing it wrong. I had to learn how to cook on my own, and she hates it. My parents are also very against academic success. I was a 4.0 student, graduated with a 4.77 GPA after giving up on school, with over 86 awards accumulated over my schooling. I was not allowed to join extracurricular activities, I could not participate in school programs, and I absolutely could not attend any event I was invited to. I was invited to international exchange programs, Microsoft events, presidential student events, etc., etc. My parents were also very sure to rub in the fact that they could afford these endeavors, but instead spent the money on their own luxuries like my dad's old '87 Mustang. Or buying new cars every 2 years. Or buying a camper. Or four-wheelers. Or guns. My parents never showed any sort of emotional affection towards one another either. In the 22 years I've been alive, I can count how many times I've seen my parents kiss on the mouth. Twice. They do not have any physical contact, spend 99% of their time cussing or calling each other sarcastic names, and absolutely never, I repeat never, express any affection towards one another. My entire childhood I was repeatedly told I cannot touch other people. Even now as an adult, my parents are weird if I am sitting beside my fiancé. Sitting beside, key word here. They used to break our stuff. Pin us against the wall and punch us. Throw us on the floor. Drag us by our hair. Punch, kick, bite, slap, etc., etc. The usual shit you expect from parents who hit each other then move on to their kids. When I broke my ankle, it was clearly broken, and I couldn't walk properly for 3 months. I was never taken to get it checked. I jumped off the ramp that led into our shed, expensive shed they bought, just to have, you know, and my foot landed in a hole. The bottom of my foot bent and touched my calf, and it was dangling. I physically couldn't walk back to the house, so I crawled on all fours screaming in pain. I was in 5th grade. I crawled into the house crying, and my mom looked at me and said, "Why the fuck are you crying?" And I told her my foot touched my calf and I can't walk, and she looked at me and said, "It's probably broke, go to your room." So for the next 3 months, I went to school with some gauze half-ass wrapped around my ankle and had to limp everywhere. My teachers let me go to lunch 20 minutes early, because by the time I made it to the cafeteria, the class was already there. Then my parents also decided it was a great idea to put a poisonous thorny tree in our front yard, which I ran into by accident and had to get a 3 thorns surgically removed from inside my hand. But back to the point. Yada yada, abusive and blah. Well, when I was in middle school I met a girl named Nicole. Her family is exactly what you see in sitcoms. The bubbly boob implant stay-at-home mom who bakes cookies for her children's school. The father who makes $200,000 a year, and makes sure to invest every bit back into his family. They had actual fruit and vegetables in their house. I stayed the night one time and her mom made crepes. I was so surprised because I never seen anyone cook a breakfast like that and sit at a dining table together. For me, it was so weird to watch. They had 3 children also, but each had a savings fund for college as well as spending money for doing chores. That really confused me because I thought that was only in movies. Their entire family made me so confused. I legitimately didn't think parents acted that way. Her mom and dad hugged and said they loved each other. I seriously had to sit down and talk with her and ask if they always acted this way. As time went on and I started to meet other people's parents, I realized, yeah, what the fuck happened with mine? This is a very interesting question. I guess I've never quite put it that way. I don't think my parents were bad at parenting. I think they made some decisions that were bad, who hasn't? But on the whole, I'm much more satisfied with my upbringing than most Westerners are. There were things I'd never, ever do to a child of mine. But, within the cultural framework of the place and time I grew up, they were not especially out of the ordinary. Corporal punishment. Broken promises. Unfairness. The last one has stayed with me. I'm still puzzled that a parent should do such a thing. It's not the end of the world. It wasn't abusive. But, see for yourself. 1, sister is 6 years older than me. 2, sister gets more pocket money. 3, sister is a spendthrift and spends all her money. 4, I am a saver. 5, sister borrows money from me. 6, sister consistently refuses to pay me back. 7, I complain to mom. 8, mom asks me to be kind and drop it. 9, I refuse. I saved this money painstakingly over a long time. 10, mom promises she'll pay me back. 11 months later, mom, can I have that money you said you'd pay me back? 12, mom tells me that money went towards my school uniform and school supplies. 13, I complain that this isn't fair, that she never told me that this would be the use of the money at the time, and that these are things she does regardless of whether she's promised to pay me back some money or not. 14, mom blows me off. Things like that happened more than once when I was a kid. I'm still annoyed as I type this. And yet, this is the same mom who sold everything she had so that I could move to the US and become who I am today. Surely, that's worth the promises she broke when I was a kid. That's how I reason. I also never, ever lend my family members any money. If I have the money to give, I'll give it. Otherwise, nope. No loan. In December 2011. Roughly 1 week before I kicked my mother out of my home and life. Oh fine, rambling is more my style anyway. Essentially, my mother set herself up to fail. She was a single parent, and up until perhaps a few years prior, my standard for what a strong, independent woman was supposed to be. As the only positive constant in my life for the first 14-ish years, she established my work ethic. I only remember a few years where she only worked one job in that span of time, my views on integrity and personal responsibility. I stopped having a curfew or bedtime at I think about 9, but I was responsible for whatever consequences came of my choices, and consequently, opted to be home and in bed at an appropriate time more often than not anyway, and proper etiquette. This last point will be highlighted quite a bit. Now, if you've read my other answers, you'd pretty rapidly realize I was a soldier, and that I have PTSD. I was initially, and I think still technically am, misdiagnosed as being bipolar in 2010, and given a pretty hefty lithium prescription for the same before being transferred to Fort Benning in June 2011, wherein I got to rediscover the joys of being stationed in Georgia, while, I think admirably, adjusting to a new marriage and pregnancy. Yeah, pregnant women I've interacted with seem to categorically not like heat and humidity. It was fun. Anyway, around August or September, the new wife's brother came down with his son, ostensibly to escape the Midwest and find employment. Alas, things went awry, as they often do, and we were suddenly a one-vehicle household, with one person who could not miss work, *raises hand*. We established a system of fair trade. I was paying all the bills, the wife was not killing everything that made her think of the word sweat, and her brother contributed food to the house, helped around the house, etc. Then, my mother calls me. I honestly can't remember when, exactly, but I think mid-September-ish. She's having some sort of medical problem, something stint removal something or other. Sure, Mom, come on down. Now the finer details are blurry because of that fun lithium prescription that turned me into a walking zombie. An ironically seething, angry walking zombie, at that. Couldn't tell you a specific thing I was angry at, but I pretty much wanted everything dead that wasn't food, nicotine, music, or my wife. Not specifically, just in general. I hated everything. Anyway, Mom moved in, and my life began descending into a spectacularly vivid redefinition of hell. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to argue with a pregnant woman about, well, anything. They win. And if you somehow don't lose, you'll probably still feel like someone kicked you in the feels. We will now get into the list of things I had to put up with on a daily basis, once the proper perspective is given. In summary, I am now the sole financial income in a household comprised of me, my pregnant wife, her brother, his son, and my mother. Money is tight, which is stressful. I am working 12 to 18-hour days, which is also stressful. And dealing with army stuff I have no particular business dealing with given my diagnosis, which didn't relax me any. Now, we get to the listing of ill-thought-out ideas. As of the first time I went to someone else's house for a sleepover. The rule was, when you are a guest in someone's home, you do not question their rules. If you disagree with a rule, leave. I came home, nearly constantly, to some argument between my mother and my pregnant wife. Over dumb shit. To a point where, I suggested just writing up house rules and posting them on the fridge. Most of this was over my mother's incessant need to make food in the middle of the night, which would wake my pregnant wife. The wife wrote up the rules, and I vaguely remember seeing her tape them to the fridge when I left for work at 4:45. I return home at 19:30, and behold the splendor of my mother's writing next to every single fucking rule questioning why it should apply to her. Fun. I was raised that you do what you can to help out of respect. The brother ended up heading back to the Midwest to get away from my mother. Before he left, as mentioned, he provided food for the house, frequently pawned his stuff to buy the house, K.A. Me, the ball of unfocused rage, smokes, whatever he could to help out. My mother taught his son to steal cigarettes from me and my wife and her brother to keep her habit going on other people's dime. Money was a commodity that didn't exist, until I decided whatever it was wasn't worth giving up something essential for, like internet. Didn't need it, we needed gas to get Madame Preggers to the doc for appointments. Simple. Suddenly, my mother has friends. And they have money they can send to make sure we don't lose internet. And she can get cigarettes. For herself. Repeatedly. I kinda wanted to leave with the brother-in-law. I'll skip the rest of the list and get to where I finally had enough. New scene, it's December. I have a lovely little baby girl that is the only thing that calms the pounding, festering desire for Armageddon raging inside me at the end of my now typical 15 to 20-hour days. She likes the fact that I am overflowing with nervous energy, and is absolutely enamored with bouncing on my leg while I do the 2 to 4 hours of paperwork I do at home before I get to go to bed and repeat the next day. This is my daddy-daughter time. The only thing in the entire world I care about, honestly. I lost pretty much all of the time with my first daughter, I'm still working on making that up, somehow, and all I ever wanted was to be the father I never got to have, so this is kinda my thing. Plus, she's freaking adorable. Who doesn't love someone adorable who is just genuinely ecstatic you came home? Psychos and sociopaths, that's who. I'm just a little unstable, that's all. So, particularly long, crappy day, and the baby is probably teething, since she's been less happy than normal, apparently all day. I take her, to give exhausted new mommy a break, and I just settle into my chair of finishing up the last of the army crap I gotta do. Oh, and it's Friday, so I actually get to spend time with my wife tonight when I'm done. Bonus. My ass touches the seat, I get maybe one bounce in, and my mother storms into the room and snatches my child from my lap. I'm vaguely certain she said something about not being able to take a child screaming and suffering anymore or something, but it's all speculation through the murderous rage of "you took my child from my lap." Now, I'm not sure how non-unstable people react to things like that, but I was actually pretty impressed with me for not immediately murdering the ever-loving out of the thing that just said it wanted to die in every language I understood. I, calmly, removed my child from her, placed her back on my leg as I retook my seat and resumed my one calm solace from the rest of the world. I didn't say anything, because you don't say things you don't mean. It was a rule I was raised with. I ignored whatever she said until she approached again, wherein I felt compelled to inform her that if she touched my child again, I would remove her bodily from my home. I finish work, my little angel is sleeping peacefully, my wife is making some sort of snack for us time, and I step outside to smoke a cigarette. My mother, for whatever reason, feels compelled to follow, and I honestly couldn't tell you to this day what she said before the dumbest thing I ever heard come out of her mouth to that point spewed forth. I have a right to hold her if I want, she's my granddaughter. She seemed absolutely confused when I pointed out that she didn't have a right to anything involving my child that I did not grant. She should know that better than anyone, she raised me with that mentality. In fact, I quoted her saying it to my abusive ex-stepfather. No recollection at all, and she tried to argue. I went inside, had us time, got some sleep, and pondered for a whole weekend what exactly she'd accomplished in the months she had been parasitically draining me of money, patience, and quite literally sanity. Mom, you ever get anything figured out about that stint thing? No. You always have the car for work. So, you need a car to make a phone call? No medical stuff done. The entire reason she initially asked to move in with me. 2/3 of what little is in the fridge is labeled Mom's, and most of the rest is WIC stuff. And I'm out of cigarettes. Great. Accounts negative, again, and I don't get paid till tomorrow. Awesome. But I know Mom got money from some random friend a few days ago, which is why we still have the internet I was perfectly fine going without 2 months ago. So she has smokes. Mom, can I have a cigarette? Are you out? No, Mom, I just thought it would be great to come test your generosity by requesting the grossest things I've ever smoked in my life. Yup. Can't get more till tomorrow. Here. Hands me one. One. Okay. I go smoke it, the wife follows me, since apparently she can tell I'm annoyed. I explain, the neighbor hears me explaining, calmly, and tosses me a pack of smokes. Man, Southern hospitality is amazing, whatever else I may feel about the South in general. And this guy I've known for 6 months just offered me more help, with no strings attached, than my mother has in, a decade. Hey, the pity. Mom, those lessons were all we're heading up to Iowa for Christmas on Friday. You have until then to figure out where you're going. I don't know about anyone else's PTSD. Mine requires constant environmental shifting. Maybe one day. I cannot handle too much stress. So I simply don't. She raised me to hate hypocrites. Then she broke all of her own rules. Maybe she forgot the man she raised me to be. More's the pity, those lessons were all I had left to rebuild myself when I lost who I once was. She never even noticed before she became another faceless body in an ocean of almost 8 billion that I just don't have the capacity to worry about. Maybe one day. We'll see. I think I was 6 years old. I had been playing with my younger cousin next door. Went back to my house for dinner. I was already sleeping by the time my mother got home at around 10 p.m. She suddenly yanks me out of bed and started beating me with my older sister's horse whip. My sister used to go to a horseback riding school called DeRosa, and her whip was made of very thick rubber with a leather tip. My mother first struck me at the neck, then my chest, then it was a flurry of whips all over. I remember cringing and scurrying over to the farthest corner of my small room to get away from her. She followed me, hitting my legs and arms. I imagine I was balled up in a fetal position because she hit my butt and back. My aunt had come into the house to check why I was screaming. She pulled my mother back away from me, restrained her and carried me out of my room and into her car to bring me to the hospital. I was unconscious for 2 days at the intensive care unit. She had broken one of my ribs when she kicked me and knocked me out when she punched my head and broke my nose. She had beaten me black and blue all over. It turned out that the maid from my aunt's house thought that I had taken the money that was supposed to be paid for their water bill, and she told my mother about it as soon as she got home. She didn't know that my uncle had taken the money that afternoon to pay it himself. I stayed at the ICU for 5 days and a total of 2 weeks in the hospital. To this day my mother has never once apologized for what she did to me. Let me start off with this. My parents divorced when I was 6. My mom willingly gave up custody of my sister and me because she was pregnant and chose to stay with a not-so-great guy who turned out to be a rapist. She moved to Florida when I was in the 3rd grade. I saw her maybe once every couple years until I was 16 when she decided to divorce the guy. She then lost her teaching job and decided to move back to Missouri. My dad got custody. Remarried a woman with 3 girls of her own. It honestly felt like an Ella Enchanted story without the happy ending. My dad worked all the time and my stepmom treated me like I was a terrible person, all while letting her daughters whore around and buy them whatever they wanted. When I got a job at 16, I paid for everything I owned except for my car and health insurance, phone, and main food supply. Anyway, my mom's second marriage resulted in 2 children. One is now 16. The other is 12. They are so freaking lazy, and rude, and not disciplined at all. The 16 years old doesn't eat anything outside of chicken nuggets, French fries, and cottage cheese. She refuses to eat anything else. The 12 years old is a bit more respectful, has ADD my mom refuses to get her tested and treated for. Along with dyslexia. My mom doesn't make them do anything. She barters with the 16 years old just to get her to do dishes or eat food. My mom refuses to raise them and wants to be their friend. Meanwhile, my older sister and I were raised by our dad, who taught us work ethic, money management, and independency. We are both still recovering from the divorce, 16 years later. My mom gives us the cold treatment, then turns around and tries to be our best friend. She has manic bipolar depression. It really struck me that my mom is a terrible parent when I suggested giving my younger sisters some more freedoms and teach them independency. She took it as I was jealous of my younger sisters and even sent me a long text message going on about it. I can't stand being around her for more than a day, if that. And it hurts not having a good relationship with her, especially after seeing how strong a relationship my fiancé has with his parents. So yeah. Parents can suck. My dad is a really good person. He just wasn't quite the dad I needed when I was still living with him, since he worked all the time and I would see him for maybe 4 hours a week. I learned to rely on no one. Now, as an adult, he tries to be more present. But I live 3 hours away for college. He'll send me money if I need it, like $100 if that. But I haven't seen him in 7, almost 8 months. All I can say is, I hope I'm a better parent than my parents were. Last night. It was kind of weird. My wife and I were talking about being kitty parents. While we are trying for children, we're pretty sure one of us is infertile. We don't know for sure, but in the meantime we still call ourselves kitty parents. Anyways, we got talking about what our strongest memories growing up were. Apparently one of my strongest memories is of my parents going through my bedroom with a trash bag. See, I have ADD. As an adult, that means I write answers on Quora when I'm supposed to be writing software, or more likely doing the dishes. As a child, that meant that if it didn't interest me, I couldn't stay focused on it, and that went triple if something that did interest me was within arm's reach. So when I was told to clean my room, as children are, I had this real problem where I would pick up a handful of items and put them away. Then I would get distracted by all of the various toys on the floor of my room, which I absolutely had to play with right now because they're awesome. Several hours later, my parents would discover me playing with toys, usually Legos or some kind of action set if memory serves, and my room looked worse than it did before they sent me to clean it. They would yell and scold and in general tell me that I wasn't allowed to play with toys until all of the toys were put away and the trash was thrown away. When that didn't work and it was getting to be late and I for some bizarre reason still hadn't cleaned my room, they would solve it by coming through with a trash bag. They were selective about what went in the trash bags too. They specifically went for toys. I would start crying and racing my parents trying to put my favorite toys away faster than they could throw them away. It would be a furious race, but I would be slowed by the fact that I had to prioritize. If my favorite Lego set was thrown but not that toy soldier of which I have dozens, that would be even worse result, and actually, put away, all organization went out the window. The toys meant that they always managed to collect more than I could save. This ritual would happen about once every 2 months, usually every month during summer break and less often during the school year. I never did manage to figure out how to clean my room for the record. They stopped caring. After I moved out, they had to get help to clean out all of the pop bottles I had left behind and to box up all of the stuff I had so that I could take it off of their hands. All of this is bad enough that they didn't figure out another solution after 1 or 2 times of this. It's bad enough that they literally got me to tears, as their solution wasn't even supposed to be a punishment, just a natural result of me taking too long. What's worse is they should have been able to figure out why this happened. My mom identified ADD specifically in me and was instrumental in getting me diagnosed at around age 7. She had been an advocate for ADD for some time before that and was actively an advocate for me at school to make sure that I had the resources available to learn despite ADD, which was a challenge no doubt. She really knew what ADD was. So it should have been zero surprise to her that her ADD son wasn't able to focus on cleaning his room. It's not like I had more ability to focus anywhere else. She should have known that something was required to focus me simply because that was how my brain worked. She either didn't figure it out, I hope, or was too overwhelmed, I'm willing to consider, or actively didn't want to deal with it, I hope not. In the end though, no solutions were ever found. Things I can think of looking back that might have helped, in no particular order. Establishing a routine of cleaning my room daily before bed. While it's small and containable, I would have likely been able to clean it in a reasonable time. Sitting in the room with me and gently reminding me to clean any time I started to play. Creating structured portions of the room to work on, set timers, and on finish of the timer check on me. At least then it wouldn't have been after 4 hours. In time I probably could have learned to focus as needed. Things that can definitely improve the situation. Recognizing that your child has a reason why they didn't do what you asked. Discuss why with them. When they answer, I don't know, I just got distracted, assume that means something. Considering after 2 or 3 times that maybe your discipline method isn't working. Accepting that sometimes children are children and need more parenting than commanding. Things that generally don't improve the situation. After your child has just cleaned about 1/3 of their room in the 15 minutes it took you to throw away the remaining 2/3, say, see, if you work like that all the time, you would have been done this morning. Yelling at a child because they were left unattended in a room for 3 to 4 hours and didn't do what you had instructed them to do in that room. Deciding that your child has a need of a situational punishment when you explain to them why you used the trash bag. Oh, and for the love of all that is holy, or frankly, all that is not, don't after you bag up all the toys tell your child, now you can earn these back if you keep your room clean for 3 weeks, when you already know they have never learned the skills or discipline to do so. When they installed a fucking CCTV in our house. Oh, sorry CCTVs. There were 3 of them. They said they needed that to keep a check on the housekeepers and other domestic help. Whatever. You just don't install a CCTV in your house, unless you're some hotshot celebrity who has a 3-story house, or a really important person who has been receiving death threats. They said they'd install one in my room too. I think they were joking, but I'm not so sure. So I told them that I could sue them for child pornography. I wasn't taking any risks. I have to thank Quora for this, actually. Years ago, I saw a question, which was something like, my parents are installing a CCTV camera in my room. What should I do? It was from the answers I learned that it is illegal to install a CCTV in a place where a child undresses. I still remember thinking, oh, Poor child, they must be horrible parents, never thinking I'd myself need that information someday. Anyways, long story short, they didn't get one for my room. But there's one in the living room, one in the kitchen, and the other in the dining area. And it's not that we have a very big house either. Just a normal-sized flat with 3 bedrooms. And I'm always conscious that whatever I do outside of my room is being captured on camera. But I can't do shit about it. The camera is watching me right now as I write this answer. Once, all my bras had gone missing. A full-time domestic help, who lived in our house, had just left work. So there was the suspicion that she must have taken it. Yes, this is India, this happens here. Guess what? No one used the CCTVs to track M. But when I threw a part of my food away in the kitchen, because I didn't want to eat, they saw that. So I don't really believe in the keeping an eye in domestic help shit. The worst part is, the footage can be accessed through phone as and when they want, so I have to be extra careful when they're out of the house. You see, they have CCTVs at school, at coaching, and now at home too, so now being cautious of the cameras has become my second nature. I'm not even angry with them anymore. In fact, I'm laughing as I write this. I read this in John Green's Looking for Alaska: when you'd stop wishing that things wouldn't fall apart, you'd stop suffering when they did. I remember it so clearly. It was a changing point in my life. For my 12th birthday, I had convinced my parents to let me have a sleepover. Only about 4 or 5 girls came over and we sat upstairs in the back room eating popcorn and watched the Iron Man movie that we had just got on DVD. By this point in time, there had only been 1 or 2 times that a friend had ever come over to my house before, and I never thought there was anything weird about that. However, about halfway through the movie, when everyone was quiet and eating, is when my parents had started screaming at each other at the top of their lungs. My father was yelling at my mother about the food she had made for dinner. You know, my favorites. It was green beans, homemade mac and cheese and grilled chicken. Said that food wasn't made for him, that she never thought of him, and why did she make that tea for dinner? My mother then started to yell back. Now I and my friends at this point were sitting upstairs in absolute silence when my friend leaned over and asked me if my parents were going through a divorce. I said no, that they do this all of the time. We listened to my parents yell at each other for another hour before the yelling had stopped. By this point, my friends and I had started to talk to each other again, and it was about 9 o'clock at night when my father burst into the room, dirty looked my friends and told us all to shut up and go to sleep, that we were loud and annoying. He turned the lights off and slammed the door shut. There was a long pause, people shuffling to lay down and all of my friends slowly going to sleep. I, however, did not sleep. I was so ashamed and humiliated at what my friends had witnessed and how they had been treated, I just couldn't. When we had gotten up that morning to pack up and leave, my parents acted as nothing had happened. They waved my friends goodbye and told them to come back anytime. My friends never did. I had never had the courage to invite any of them back, but once, it was the girl who to this day is my best friend. She had told me that she has never been more uncomfortable in her entire life and didn't feel that it was right to go back. I didn't blame her then for not wanting to go back to my house, and me sure as hell don't now. That behavior that my parents displayed that day only grew and got worse only, and as time went on I had become the focus of it. However, it was just me and not my other 3 older siblings, just me. So when we moved, when I enter high school, I never brought anyone home in fear and embarrassment of how my parents acted. High school is when I bought my first car and started being able to go over to my friends' houses, which my parents had never allowed before. At 12, I didn't know why I was ashamed of my friends seeing my parents, but at 16, when I was allowed over at their houses, I knew why. My friends' parents treated any of us that came over with respect, treated their children with respect, and they clearly loved each other, or if they were divorced, had compassion and respect for each other in public. My father will stand in the middle of Walmart screaming at the top of his lungs at the cashier because she was having trouble with the scanner. He will scream at me when I got pickup for and only bring for 2 large French fries instead of 3. When I am only getting food for him and my mother. I am currently living at home as I go to college and work a part-time job. I have been friends with people for 6 years of my life and they have never been to my house. They kept asking and asking till one day I was on the phone with my friend right after I had made dinner and my father had started to scream at me about if the food wasn't salted enough. He went on for 30 minutes and by the time I got away my friend was still on the phone. All she said was, "So that's why you don't want me over and you're saving to never live with them again?" I said yes and we have never spoken about it again. My father never had a part of raising me. He missed the first 10 years of my oldest brother's life and is good friends with him. He says that my sister was the first child he truly connected with, and that my other brother was his first chance at raising a son. Me, I'm the last one to get out. He didn't care how I did in school, my after-school activities, or spending time with me. He only really has talked to or about me because I'm the only child he has that graduated high school and went right to college and has a job. Even then he says what I do is pointless and that I sit at home and do nothing even though I pay rent. At 12 I realized that my dad was a bad parent. At 16 I realized that he was verbally abusive and that my mother is no better as she never stops or corrects him. She sometimes adds in, "I have one more year left till I graduate with my bachelor's, I have a nice nest egg and have done investing and I got a good job lined up." I spent my 21st birthday alone and only got a real birthday card from my grandparents and friends. From my parents I got a card that said happy birthday on the front, the inside completely black with my parents' names print at the bottom. It was my mother who signed both names. That was when I swore that I will move out and never return to this house. That I have no real parents here. I still cry about it as I look slowly buy things to fill my apartment when I move out because I still love them, and have to face the reality that they don't love me. For me it was a long time to fully come to term that my parents were bad parents, and as I still live with them the realization is hellish to live with. I sorry if anyone else has to live with this and has had to stand on their own while being put down. I pretty much grew up in a household where domestic violence by my father was the norm, and my mother loved to play the victim card. I'll never understand their psychology. My father isn't a drunkard. He's never touched alcohol in his life. So there's no alcohol to blame on for his violent behavior either. And then comes my mother who will dig up anything and everything from the past to stir shit up. Things will be normal and happy one minute, and then my mother will come up with something from the past to fight over. My earliest memories consist of seeing my parents fighting, throwing stuff at each other, so much so that I remember one of them throwing my half-finished dinner plate at the other one. We've never had a family trip where their fights did not ruin things. But these are all stuff between them, which I just watched silently over 2 decades. But then comes my interaction with them. For a violent man, my father taught me non-violence as a kid, turning the other cheek. I guess it applied only to others and not to him. The result? I became the punching bag of my area, with kids beating me up for fun. I still remember the day I lost it, caught hold of one guy and beat him up in anger. I was happy though my father was disappointed. Time went on as I became timid and was bullied by even the weakest kid in school. Fast forwarding to high school, after years of getting bullied, I fell in love with a girl. My mother didn't like it though, given that we were Indians, and were not supposed to fall in love, but sleep with a random stranger one day post-marriage and produce babies. One day, she caught me doing the most horrendous act she could imagine. Talking to a girl. And the lectures I got from her were traumatic. She compared me to every adult male in my family to show how, sans carry, they were to never have even female friends, and how I was the black sheep of the family, how I had disgraced her. The disgust on her face was clear. Result, I became the weird kid in school that girls ran from. Finally, in my 10th, we visited a farmhouse, which had a ballroom. Naturally, being the awkward kid, I decided not to go in and disgrace myself. At home though, my mother, on listening to what all happened, gave me another lecture on how good kids don't go to dance even though I hadn't gone. Result? I'm still afraid to dance. I have never visited a nightclub with my friends. I've never asked a girl to dance. I seize up whenever the need for me to dance comes up. My rant goes on though. My mother made sure I never had a girlfriend, and never left the town for higher studies. All decision of my education were taken by her, such that I got into the colleges with least number of girls, and closest to home. The time I took to reach home was monitored, so as to make sure I didn't go out anywhere after college. If I bunked class someday, she used to come herself the next few weeks to pick me up from college to make sure I wasn't bunking. Going out with friends required her permission, which many a times was a no. In case it was yes, there used to be a limit to how far I can go from college/house until what time. This usually meant I had a curfew of 6 p.m. Result? I had no friends. The girls I liked? Already dating some other guy. I had gone badly into depression. At the age of 20, I slit my wrist and was rushed to the hospital. My mother did not feel sorrow. She felt ashamed of how to tell someone that her son had attempted suicide. Oh, her reputation. Meanwhile, my dad was pissed that he had to spend so much money to patch me up, and that because I could not clean up all the blood spilt on the floor, he had to clean it up. After graduating, I was jobless and still in depression. I had a weak personality, if at all there was any. My grades were crap, along with the mounting pressure of my parents telling me how I used to score 80 to 90% in school, and was scoring in 50s in college. Who would my parents blame, but my mobile phone, which was a crappy one that could only make calls or send SMSs, and bad friends. Ironically, I had very few friends. One fine evening, I was telling my mother we should paint our house, because the old paint was cracking. Something snapped, and my mom told me she should go sell herself so that people will pay me crores and I can enjoy all that money. FYI, my parents are not poor in any way. I never realized when I left home, walked to the gym and kept staring at the weights for 15 minutes till someone told me to move. I cried in the gym showers for half an hour. Imagine a guy of 20 years crying. I left the gym that day a changed guy. I went from working out daily for 3 hours to finding excuses to go to the gym. My weight shot up and went from 95 kilograms to 113 kilograms. I still have not been able to go back to gym till date. Yet another day, I wasn't hungry, so told my mother I can't finish all the food in my plate. Something snapped again, and she told me to throw the plate out of the window, how I'm a nuisance to her, and how she should kill herself just to get some peace. Age 23, my mother started screaming at me for buying something without her permission, a packet of chips. This was the moment something snapped in me. I banged my laptop, a small one which I had to fight for 2 months to get, as we needed it for engineering, on my bed. My mother of course did not stop there. She continued further on how I look like a fat blob, and how I have become dark-skinned and ugly, like people cleaning the streets. That was the turning point. I smashed the laptop, which now lay with a few loose buttons, destroying its screen. I was having a complete breakdown. I had had enough. I was ready to leave the house and my family there and then. Somehow I overcame that impulse as I had no money. Weirdly, my mother comforted me after that, asking if I was angry with her, and wanted to punish her for something wrong she might have done. Next day, I visited a psychiatrist, and various tests later, was diagnosed as bipolar. I've spent the past few years on those happy pills, going in and out of therapy, while my parents wonder whether my mood changes are due to some girl who's torturing me mentally, or whether it's something due to bad positions of planets. My therapist went haywire at my mother after I told her all this. My mom, however, ended up abusing the therapist. Now, as per my parents, whenever I have burst of anger or depression, it's either due to my mobile phone, many of which I've smashed so far, or due to spending too much time on social media, where I have no one to talk to, or due to my therapist, who is trying to poison me against them. Result? I'm lonely, depressed, suicidal, with a lack of self-confidence, have anger issues, fat and gaining more and more weight daily. I love seeing horror movies, and hate watching comedy. Romantic films make me want to smash the TV. Though my most favorite clips? Real gore and blood. Watching people suffer. And even after all this, my parents still believe they are as innocent as a lamb. Everything was always my fault, growing up. My little sisters are upset. I should have been watching them better. The family computer has a virus? Must have been from when I last used it. All of the crackers are gone. I will be blamed for eating them all. My parents would go out every night. My mom is an alcoholic, my dad only ever works third shift. My older siblings took that as their free pass to do whatever they wanted, but I had to stay home. I had to watch my little sisters. No one else was home, I had to look after them. Sorry, I can't stay the night at your house tonight, I have to watch the girls. But didn't you watch them last weekend? Yeah, I have to watch them every weekend. Where are your parents? I don't know. Everything I did was questioned, criticized without being constructive. Why do I walk that way? Why do I drink that way? Why do I switch words when I speak too fast? Why am I not like my older sister? My own questions are deemed annoying and stupid, and people tell me nowadays, there are no stupid questions, but I disagree, because every question I've ever asked growing up was labeled a stupid question. My inquiries are turned around, so that somehow, it's my fault for not knowing what I don't know. I didn't know the name of my cousin, so I asked, and I was made fun of for not knowing his name. I didn't know the directions to get the store, and I was made fun of for not paying attention when my parents drove to the store. You should know how to get there by now. Not only are my questions annoying, but my feelings and emotions are pointless and irritating. Stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about. I was never really beaten, but I've been spanked and threatened with violence. My dad would hold up a shaking fist, and that would be enough to get me to stop feeling whatever I was feeling. I started to play the violin and joined choir in 7th grade. I played and sang all through junior year of high school. My parents went to maybe 3 or 4 concerts. One time, in orchestra class, my peers were debating when their parents would show up to the concert. My mom will probably be too drunk to come tonight, I said, dejectedly. My peers laughed. They had never seen their parents drink alcohol. I think my mom drank wine once. By junior year I was so depressed and fed up with life that I gave up the violin. My diaries and journals were not only read, but edited. I wrote stories upon stories all the time in my journals. But sometimes words would be crossed out, replaced, sentence structures would be reworked, paragraphs would be missing entirely. So I stopped writing. When I finally moved out, well, our house was foreclosed, so we were forced out. Technically, I moved into a place with my best friend and her husband. I was 19. I reached my lowest point, I think. I quit college. I quit everything. I go to work, I go home, I hate myself. Rinse. Repeat. And then one day, my roommate took me to her mom's house to watch The Walking Dead. I watched the way she interacted with her mom, how easily they spoke to each other, how comfortable they were, how they were so relaxed, so able to talk about everything. She told her mom about something that made her cry. If I told my mom about something that made me cry, she would tell me to get over it. When we went home, I started to think, what if my parents weren't good parents? The thought was so disturbing I shoved it away, back far into my mind. It's not possible, right? It was my fault, everything was my fault. If I had just known the answers to my questions, I wouldn't have been annoying. If I had just kept my feelings to myself, if I had just, if. How I was treated was my fault, right? I was the defective one. I can't blame my parents for that, can I? But then a year went by, and half of another, and I worked up the courage to Google abusive parents. I didn't believe the first website I found, so I went to another, and another, and another. I went through the first 3 pages of Google, the deep web if you will, and all the answers were the same. All of the signs were right there, flashing in front of my face. My parents are abusive. It took me 22 years to be able to write that sentence, that 4-worded, bullshit sentence, that doesn't even begin to cover the damage of what it did to me. And guess what, everybody? It wasn't my fucking fault.
Please leave your story in the comments, I would love to make a video on them in the future also. Don't forget to like and subscribe to you never miss a video.